The world is a strange planet, made of strange people, strange places, and strange events. These are the lists that expose the truth about the strangest things that happen here, on Earth, the strangest planet in the world. These are Miklists. The sky. Its omnipresent presence presides pretty much over all of us, every day of our lives. I say pretty much because there are a few minor exceptions: those who dwell in caves, people in submarines, anyone in a spacecraft, and the Fourth or Fifth Reich, whichever it is at this point, that has lived beneath the Antarctic snows ever since Adolf and crew booked it south in his Uber UFO, a craft designated the Lil Hitler. The sky gives us warmth, air, birds, solar power, wind and wind power, the previously mentioned space, the energy for plants to grow, clouds shaped like teddy bears and UAPs, actual UAPs, and certain melanomic cancers. But the sky can also be dangerous. It assaults us with rain, hails, snow, hurricanes, toxic clouds shaped like death, meteorites, satellite parts, aliens bent on domination, and certain melanomic cancers. Occasionally, the sky can just be confusing. Take so-called skyquakes, a global phenomenon characterized by loud sounds of unknown origin that people have guessed are caused by the likes of atmospheric shock waves created by coronal mass ejections from the sun, distant construction or agricultural equipment, the collapsing of underwater caves, or, trumpets of angels heralding the end times. Also called mist poofers, that is adorable. Skyquakes have been reported back at least as far as the early 1800s, so if angels are indeed attempting to warn us of something, they are playing possibly the slowest jazz mix biblically available. But quakes are not the only odd noises that come roaring from our skies, and sometimes these sounds cause quite the ruckus. 5 times random screaming from the sky interrupted everyday life. Number 5. Gettysburg Address. Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, November 19th, 1863. Totaling a scant 271 words, the Gettysburg Address, the speech given by President Abraham Lincoln at the dedication of Soldiers' National Cemetery in Gettysburg, is one of the most well-known speeches in American history. For reference, the novel Twilight, written in jest by comedienne Stephanie Meyer, has a word count of roughly 119,000. The national anthem comes in at 81-ish words, depending on whether or not you count the letter O as a word, and the word count of a haiku-style poem is, in fact, not fixed, and is instead comprised of 3 lines with a syllabic content of 5, 7, 5, respectively. While most high school history classes cover the abbreviate speech, very few of them go into details as to exactly why. After decreeing that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth, Lincoln had written and planned to recite an additional 816 words, which would have made the total speech roughly 4 times as long as it ended up being. But as Lincoln opened his mouth to continue with the next line, which for the historical record would have begun, "Apologies for the math, I'm hoping someone in the crowd has brought along a slide rule," a different sound filled the air. Random screaming. From the sky. The source of this screaming was never determined beyond the sky, but its effects were immediate. The gathered crowd instantly dispersed. Lincoln was ushered into cover in a cold shelter, and by the time anyone popped their heads out to see what was going on, the sounds had ceased. Lincoln, it turned out, was fine with this, as he was under the weather at the time of the speech, according to 3 of the largest US-based Wikipedias, with a light case of what turned out to be smallpox. Number 4. Wedding Vows. Winona, Minnesota, January 19th, 2003. The nuptials of Carl and Helen Tinkles Johnson on the 19th of January 2003 were a series of beautiful and joyous festivities for everyone in attendance, and they were also horrifying. This would normally be a groom with cold feet joke, but in this case it was everyone who was horrified. And directly after being pronounced bride and groom, an ancient curse activated and the sky screaming began. The reception continued roughly unabated with the guests that chose to remain, though the ancient curse in this scenario may or may not have been attributed to faulty wiring on the venue's PA and music system, it is definitely said to repeat, like clockwork, every 20 years, to one unlucky couple brazen enough to choose the city and date. Helen and Carl remain happily married nearly 20 years later, claiming the event solidified their love for one another. Somehow. Number 3. Voyage of the Santa Maria, Atlantic Ocean, October 7th, 1492. Internationally recognized asshole Christopher Columbus, pillager and slaver, once got so lost in a boat that he finished a race he'd never entered, and though proven demonstrably false time and time again in the years since, incorrectly claimed he'd won that race, hands down. On the 7th of October 1492, Chris, presumably drunk and mumbling something racist in his sleep, was awoken by the sounds of sky screaming coming from somewhere overhead. Likely stumbling drunkenly outside while making some sort of racist remark, Chris joined his crew on deck, where they reported seeing immense flocks of birds, squawking loudly, which, apparently, Chris managed not to see. Confused and terrified, Chris returned to his cabin to pray the fray away. According to the description of the Seagull Sounds app available in the Google Play Store, far from the pleasant tweeting melody of a songbird, seagulls have loud and raw vocalizations that sound more like a scream or a screech. Seagulls commonly make a mew sound or a loud ha 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 that serves as an alarm call. Both male and female gulls make a huo huo sound during courtship or confrontations over territory. It then asks, can you identify these unique seagull sounds? Chris Columbus, it turns out, could not. Number 2. Wheel of Fortune taping, Los Angeles, California, September 19th, 1994. Though currently recorded in front of a live studio audience at Sony Pictures Studios in Culver City in Los Angeles, the 1994 version of Wheel of Fortune was recorded at CBS Television City, also in Los Angeles. Though immensely popular at the time, the Culver City Wheel of Fortune was both a production and insurance nightmare, and during the format transition to Television City, a number of the more dangerous elements, namely the open flames, alligator pit, and live fire portions, were removed completely. On the 19th of September 1994, hosts Patrick Sajak and Vanna White took the stage after a lunch break filled with highly caffeinated coffee beverages imported from what producers called, quote, voodoo areas, as during the network changeover, cocaine was also eliminated as a line item from the budget. When both hosts collapsed, momentarily, to the floor, Patrick lurched forward, nearly toppling over his podium and landing him on the wheel itself, something that would have been most unfortunate. The reason for this sudden near unconsciousness was what some conspiracy theorists believe to be the very first test fire of the weapon now known to cause Havana syndrome. Patrick reported the concentrated sound waves sounded like the screaming of an unjust god, whatever that means, and never returned to the show, leading to the hiring of replacement host Pat Sajak for all subsequent episodes and seasons, who retains the position to this day. Number 1. ISS Incident, March 23rd, 2009. Velma Shaw, single mother from Houston, Texas, observing the International House of Space Station through the telescope on which she had probably spent too much money, considering her son had never even opened the box, supposedly watched on as the IHOS experienced a frightening valve failure and drifted even further away from the planet than it was supposed to. It would not be the worst of the evening's shocking experiences, however. Random screaming from the sky. Shaw jumped up, startled, and left the balcony, returning to her teenaged son inside. She would never learn whether or not her suspicions were correct, that the high-pitched screaming of hydrogeologist Joe Acaba aboard the IHOS was to blame for the screaming, or if perhaps her son's sudden interest in the band Gwar that had resulted in the evening's auditory event. A similar event occurred on the 6th of January 2022, when a group of terrorists gathered in Washington, D.C. to attend a speech given by their leader, twice impeached Florida man Donald Trump. But anytime Trump opened his mouth, the PA system simply broadcast a loud whining noise instead of the impactful speech Trump believed himself to be giving. The whining incensed the terrorists, who collectively took mass hysteria to silly new heights and made absolute fools of themselves while murdering some people much, much better than them. Stay tuned, Mahanahan fans, and keep watching this show.